So my name is JJ Hardy, and today I'm going to be talking about organizational leadership. That's what my business centers in, and it's what I do and what I love to talk about. And so um, that's what we're going to be going into today. So the topic is why teams fail to execute and what leaders are getting wrong. And kind of the catchphrase whenever I'm talking to a company is that your team doesn't have a motivation problem. They have a leadership and they have an execution problem. And you'll find out why that's so important to me as we continue to move forward. So me and my story. That's a picture of me, but this right here is the name of my podcast. So I do podcasting. I write books. Those are my two featured books, my favorite ones. This one is it's basically a guide on how to become more resilient and how to help other people become more resilient as well. This is my story. Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. It's my story of leadership from the ground up. And in the next coming slides, you'll find out why that's significant. But the basics are, I came from poverty, didn't come from much. I had to work my way from the ground up. I was homeless as a teenager for a little while. Went into the military. That saved my life, to be honest with you, because I would have been still on drugs or being violent or whatever the case may be. I'll be honest with you, if I would have never left Iowa to begin with, I was not headed down a very good path. I was, pardon my language, but a little bit pissed off at the world. So, and then I transitioned out of the military after a full career and experienced identity loss, had to kind of pick myself back up again, rediscover who I was. And now I'm a speaker, I'm an author, and I do podcasting. And I have my own business where I do workshops and help leaders become better people. So I always tell people that when I was growing up, I really didn't have options. Everyone in my family had a poverty background, and you only know what you know. So when you come from a background where people are just doing their best to survive and they're in that survival realm, you kind of learn how to do the same thing. I got kicked out of my house at the age of 16, and it was mainly because I didn't want to put up with the abuse, didn't want to put up with the drugs in the house, and then I started doing drugs. I don't really know how that works, but and I just wasn't happy with the way things are going, and I was really just kind of mad at the world. But it taught me a lot. Living out of my truck and having to figure things out on my own, it teaches you that radical ownership and leading yourself through life is really, really, really important. And so, as I said, the military, it saved my life. And it saved my life in more than one way. It physically saved my life because I'm alive today. I don't do drugs. I have a family that, they're doing really, really well. And, I have an income for the rest of my life because of it. And that's not just something that comes overnight. A lot of people work to achieve that, sometimes with multiple careers. And I was blessed to be able to do it in 20. So I'm here now. But even in the military, you have to learn to lead. And if you don't, it's a little bit different than it is in the civilian world, in that lives could be at stake. So let me tell you a story, a couple of them. So when I first came in the military, I was very resistant to following anybody. When you come from a background like I came from, the last thing you want to do is listen to another human being. And I got a very good piece of advice very early on in my career. They said, you got to learn how to lead yourself, and you got to learn how to listen before you can take charge of your life and then eventually lead others. I didn't. I remember it to this day, but I didn't fall for that. I was when you were a young person, you're like, oh, that guy may be in his 30s or 40s, but what the heck is he doing? Then I met a woman after I got back from my first deployment. She got pregnant. And then I said, oh, shit. Well, I might actually have to take that advice now. And so I started doing that. Well, I went through training. I learned how to lead. I led teams. And then towards the end of my career, I really saw what that meant when I was on my way out of the military. It was on my last assignment. There was a commander that I had a lot of good leadership, by the way. So in the military, it's excellent leadership most of the time. Not every leader is awesome. But there was a commander that it was blizzarding outside, and he had a reputation of being very, very self-interested. And when this training exercise was going on and there was a blizzard, the roads were blacked out, he had a schedule that he wanted to keep because he was trying to impress the higher ups. And why do people do that? Well, to gain more rank. But in this situation, he didn't listen to any guidance that was put before him. And as a result of that, people actually started getting hurt. And some of the convoys, instead of going to one location to where they were supposed to go, they ignored him. And they left and they came home. Well, why am I telling you this? Because leadership can fail at any level. And so I learned even on my way out of the military that just because things are good doesn't mean they stay good. And just because you're a great person doesn't mean you're a great leader. And just because you have a reputation of doing good things, you can also have a reputation for doing very bad things. And so all of this kind of started spinning through my head. And then I left the military. And that's a very unclear story, but you'll find out where I'm going with it here in just a second. I transitioned out of the military. Well, that part of my life was completely over. And what the heck was I supposed to do now? I have absolutely no idea. I was lost. Didn't really know what to do. So I went and took care of my father-in-law. He had dementia and diabetes, and my wife's mother said, I can't put up with this guy by myself. And so I took care of him for a while. After about a year, he went downhill, and now I decided it was time for me to work. Mainly because my wife looked at me and she's like, you're driving me crazy. So it was time for me to go do something. And so I started applying for jobs. I started working, and I noticed that even though we had great leaders and very bad leaders in the military, in the civilian world, I wouldn't say that the people were bad, but the structure was so different. The structure was so different. I mean, the same stuff happened when I was in the military, but I mean, great leaders got promoted in the civilian world, but they got their team, and then they were expected just to go. Well, when there's no guidance, it causes a lot of problems. How many of y'all have ever actually experienced that where you went, okay, so it's not good. Okay, very good. Not the only one who figured that part out. Eventually, I left my last work. I worked 3 different jobs. The first one, I had a horrible experience. I was a manager who was not empowered to take care of my employees in a way where it was causing a lot of physical hardship on their lives. So I decided, I'm retired from the military. I guess I have options. I'm not doing that. So I got another job. Paid significantly less, but I was happy. They took care of their people. They did the right thing by them. It was great. But my wife was like, you're not making really any money. So you got to do something else. So I got another job, and it paid really, really well. I'm not going to lie. I was an area safety manager for a transportation company, and they were a good company, but I noticed they were promoting their really, really good drivers, and I wasn't even in operations. I was just a safety guy. So this was all observational at first. And they were promoting their people to a lead driver, saying, okay, now you got to report to me anything that you see. Well, they were dropping lead drivers like flies. And then those lead drivers got promoted to operations managers and sent somewhere. And their retention numbers there sucked as well. I was like, well, that's obvious. Why? And I started talking to my manager, and he was like, well, what would you do about it? And I said, well, I would provide them guidance. I would provide them leadership training. I would provide them structure and encourage all of the district managers and above to provide mentorship to these people. He's like, well, that's never going to happen. Well, so I decided to respectfully go above him, and I talked to the vice president of the company, and I created one that went from the local level to the regional level to the whole company. And because I didn't have a master's degree, when it came time to make that position official, they hired somebody else. And, I went on my merry way and started my own business. And that's kind of what I do now, except for I do it more as a coaching program. So the problem, I just kind of went over that. But what happens when you promote your great leader, your great execution level employees? You're not just failing these people. If you have a company, you're actually creating a retention risk. Because just because you're a great employee, that does not mean that you're going to manage things well. That does not mean you understand people. And that does not mean that you're able to nurture those employees to be as good as you were. It just doesn't mean that without proper guidance and training. Sorry, I've had a cold for a couple of days. So I'm going to go over this one more time. The issue is that great people get promoted. No leadership training is provided. They learn whatever habits they learn. Then they get promoted through the ranks. And that cycle continues until whatever habits you figure out along the way end up being whatever you decide to do once you start having leaders of your own working for you. Because that's the way it works, right? If you do a good job, eventually you get promoted and promoted and promoted until eventually, do you provide good guidance? Do you provide good mentorship? I mean, all these things, if you're not taught that in the beginning, sometimes you do it and sometimes you don't. And the organizations that I worked in, even the senior leaders weren't doing it. It was a do as I say, not as I do environment most of the time. So the pain, the actual pain that it causes. Now, I don't like to read my slides, but I'll read this one. So for new managers, there's a retention problem. Supervisors as well, depending on the type of organization you work in. Your first job might be management, might be supervision. Why? Because there's burnout. You feel like you have to do it all alone, mainly because you have nobody telling you that you can come to them if you have a problem. Nobody. And then you're trapped between your leaders above you and your team, just trying to figure it out. And by the way, just kind of survive through that, hoping that maybe you'll get a position where you don't have a direct line with people instead of, having other people work for you. And the frontline employees, so this is a ripple effect. If the leader doesn't know what the heck they're doing, do you think they're managing things correctly? Probably not. So morale is going to suck. They're going to think you're a crappy boss, and they're going to, well, depending on how well you do actually manage, because some people can manage well, they might have a lack of direction, lack of what to do, and all that other stuff, but they don't have anybody to model. So when they look for that next promotion, would they want it? If they're going to look like you doing that job, absolutely not. If that's what being a manager looks like, I'm not doing that crap. That's horrible. I'm just going to stay here. And these days, especially in the logistics world, the drivers are making more than the managers most times. So I created a framework, and that's it right there. So vision, ownership, integrity, communication, empathy, servant leadership. Those are the qualities that need to be taught to every new manager that ever gets promoted anytime, whether you are, a supervisor or manager in a business, or maybe you're starting a business of your own and you're going to be in landscaping or construction, and now you have a team. Well, if you don't display these qualities, then it's going to be the same thing. And I'll go into that more in a second. So this has been my path. Grew up with nothing. The military gave me structure. It went away. I got a fresh perspective. I started working as a manager in civilian organizations, and I saw a gap. Now I'm going to close the gap, hopefully. Well, I have for a few organizations in the past few years. And it's honestly, it can be one leader at a time. I do the one-on-one coaching thing, but my biggest success comes from doing group programs where I'm helping a bunch of people in one organization at the same time. So execution breaks when leaders lack, it's all of those things. But the biggest things are probably clarity, ownership, and communication. If you don't have a clear direction in your business, which is where the vision and all that other stuff comes in, then likely your employees are going to be walking around not really understanding what's going on either. Ownership, that's a big one. So ownership is taking responsibility for everything within your sphere of influence, which means no excuses, which means no blaming. If things suck, yeah, I'm sure there are people around you doing bad things, but the mirror is probably a lot more telling. And communication, well, if you can't communicate well, then that means things are super unclear. So this slide is just to reemphasize the point, but I believe that there are two primary groups of people that need different levels of training. Those brand new managers, and then those senior managers that now they have people working for them because they created those bad habits because they never got mentorship when they were younger. Now they probably have bad habits as they get older. They don't know, but they're providing an environment where they are controlling things instead of leading and managing things. But when leaders are developed, they execute, they're more confident, and well, I proved at the last company that I worked for that retention improved. And I don't always share the statistic, but I actually improved the management retention in that company from so it was about 30%. I think it went from 60% of manager retention to 90%. And it was, I can't remember, it was almost 5 years ago. So it's kind of hard for me to remember the exact numbers, but all it was meeting weekly and talking about stuff. When you don't talk, things are left unsaid. And so if they haven't been developed and they haven't been given the opportunity to lead and they don't have mentorship, then there's a problem. I recommend everybody this. I created a free assessment on my Voices framework. If you want to take that assessment, there's a QR code that you can scan here. I also brought a handout. If anybody wants one, does anybody want one of these? Okay.
Just pass them around.
Yeah, I'm going to pass 2 steps here. So what that does, that assessment does, is it takes about 8 to 10 minutes. And if you don't have employees, then reflect on what you have done in the past. Or if you've never had employees, just answer the questions honestly. But what it does is it breaks down where you're at as a leader based off of my voices framework that I told you about earlier. And I think it's good rather than DISC or any of those other ones. This one actually gives you an assessment that doesn't put a label on. I don't like those other ones because they put labels on people. Thank you. And I went a little bit faster than I probably wanted to here, but so this is what I help organizations fix. And so I do leadership workshops. This is actually a short version of my keynote. And I have a first-time leaders program. I have my warrior leadership program, which is for senior leaders. And then I have one-on-one coaching. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
AJ, thank you so much for your service and sharing your story.
Sure.
Really, really neat to hear just the changes in your career transition. I'm so curious about when and how you decided to write your books, and then how did you get into podcasting as well? Can you share that part?
Sure. So first of all, my podcast, and it's very cool. Once every week on Monday, I publish an episode on leadership. There's some self-leadership and there's some other stuff. And I did that. I'll be honest with you. I met quite a few people that said, if you're going to be a coach, you got to have a book and you got to have a podcast and you got to have a course and you have to have a partridge in a pear tree. You have to have everything. And so I created a couple courses. I created a podcast, and I did all the things. And actually, I got addicted to writing. It's been a lot more beneficial, probably to my process and my mental health than I ever anticipated that it would be. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I was ever going to write something, I don't even like to write an email. But now that I've been doing it and I've been talking about stuff that I'm passionate about, things have changed a little bit. Yes.
What about a situation where you have the company culture that is trying to avoid the evil of new leadership and really fix those issues that have come up within an organization that's been around for, let's say, over years?
Well, I would have to sit down and do a full consultation with that organization. I do offer that, but that's not necessarily coaching. That would be a consulting project, and I call it a project because there's some diagnostics, there's some sitting in meetings, there's some talking to the leadership in the organization one-on-one, talking to some of the employees one-on-one. I won't be able to talk to all of them, obviously, while I'm doing a consultative process, but figuring out what's going on and then helping them address all of the things.
What happens if the leadership is changed after, let's say, like a year, and the results haven't been fixed? I know Microsoft had to do a massive controversy about that, right?
Well, there's no such thing as a perfect project. And if leadership changes, that means leadership styles change. Sometimes the entire environment will change. Sometimes they even move offices around. I mean, everything changes. I mean, I would always recommend to an organization like that, I would give it 90 days, 90 to 120 days, and just see how things are with the new leadership. Don't just jump to hiring somebody to do an organizational consulting gig. I would get a feel for what's going on in the organization with the new leadership before you start paying money for something.
Yeah, I want to bring that up because I do know Microsoft had a controversy where they had original leadership. Leadership was then later let go, replaced by a new leadership, and it is said that the company culture is not that hasn't gotten any better since the old leadership, but may actually
to
the point that they're actually some former employees are actually in the middle of a lawsuit for illegal business, illegal hiring.
Well, I can't give a finite solutions to a problem that I'm not 100% clear with. Now, I have heard that as well, but until you actually get into an organization, you don't actually hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it would be hard for me to kind of describe how to do that, but definitely some one-on-ones with the leadership and everything, and it would be a lengthy project.
How have you changed since you started this? When did you have to pivot on that?
So when I first started, I said I wanna do leadership coaching. And what did that mean to me 4 years ago? I don't really know. I wanted to help people be better. And how that better was, I don't really know. But once you actually, I learned through unpaid clients is really what was going on. And I kind of had to do my own market research, and it took me. I did have some paid stuff early on, but it really took me about a year and a half of having conversations with a lot of people and kind of feeling these organizations out and what the real problems were in their organizations. I had to learn a consultative method. I had to learn everything. And that's what got me to where I am today. And so I offer these two programs specifically because any program can bring all their leaders, their young leaders, into the first time leaders course. Any organization can bring their senior leaders into the warrior leadership course, and we can work things out. Honestly, it's as easy as you watch a module a week, and then we come together and we talk about how we can take those principles that I'm teaching in that program to your organization. If it turns into a consulting project, it does. If it doesn't, well, hopefully they got something out of it. But I mean, you kind of have to work your way in. And how did I get to that point? It's because I learned that you have to have a framework or people don't trust you. So if there's any new business owners in here, do your research, figure out how to actually solve your problem, or else it's going to be very difficult. A lot of people, they would say, well, you're a great guy. I just don't know what you could do for me. Well, I think that's probably extremely common. When you have a business, you have to figure out not only what the problem is that you solve, but how you solve it and how to articulate that. That's how I got to where I am.
How do you get your word out about yourself?
I had this conversation right before we started. So I actually don't do much marketing. I post reels about, what I'm passionate about, my podcast, and I start one-on-one conversations. And it's as easy as that. But again, if you're not clear on how you solve a problem or what you do, those conversations stay at, the first thing. It'll veer off from business into personal life or anything other than your business. Yes.
Platforms, social media that you do, Facebook, Instagram,
I'm on
TikTok.
LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts.
Yep. Cool.
Yep. I try to be everywhere because you never know who's going to be watching what when.
Amen.
Thank you.
So is your podcast a separate business than your leadership business?
Well, I don't really make money in my podcast. So, I mean, it is not really separate from what I do. I use that as a voice for people to hear what I care about. And so I tell people all the time, your content on social media does not get you clients. It absolutely just does not. It shows people who you are and what you're passionate about. If you want to get a client, have a conversation. Yes.
Appreciate your service. Can you talk a little bit about, you talked a little bit about good leadership in the military and bad leadership. And my perception is like military leadership is very much top down.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that working as well today in organizations, public organizations, particularly because you need more people to take the input. And so can you talk a little bit about that, what good leadership in the military look like and what bad leadership, and then how you translate that into the public world?
So the military uses, you're right, it's top down. It is. It's very structured. Some organizations don't have hardly any structure at all. And so the lessons that you should take from what I'm about to tell you should be the interpersonal relationships that you create up, down, and lateral to you. But we call it decentralized leadership. So at every level, orders come down, you plan it together, and each section underneath whatever executes their part of the mission. Good leadership, they get people involved, not just the staff, the ones that will actually be executing these missions. And, when you have involvement, it creates ownership, because if you help make the plan, then by God, you're not going to screw it up if you can help it. And so that's what creates good communication and teamwork and all that stuff in those type of organizations. The bad leadership, it just like what you said, it's very top down, very direct, very this is what I said, this is what you're going to do. Don't question me. I mean that type of stuff. I mean, but that applies in the civilian world as well. But I mean those are the two differences. So take from it what you will, but interpersonal relationships are the most important thing in any organization, whether you have 2 employees or 1,000. Does that answer your question?
That's good.
Thank you. Anyone else?